Hi everyone, it is wonderful to see you here today. We've got quite a few people signed up for today's session, so I'm just going to give it a minute before I start. Yeah, so we'll probably start in about 2 minutes. Morning, Alex. Nice to see you. I'm looking forward to seeing some familiar faces. It's nice to see some people who are returning from other sessions. So really welcome back. And yeah, thanks very much for coming along. So we might get started because we've only got an hour together today. So, and I'd like to try and give you some time back if possible at the end. So, hi everyone, I'm Lucy and I lead the Compassionate Employers Programme at Hospice UK. I'm really thrilled to be here today. We've been working with Anchor for a few years now. So, this might not be the first time that you've seen me or heard me talk, or it might be something that's really new to you, but we're going to talk a little bit about our involvement with you guys and the membership with the Compassionate Employers Programme that you have so that you can access lots of really helpful resources and guidance after today's session. Over the next hour, we're going to talk about topics related to grief and bereavement. So throughout the session, if you feel comfortable to, I'd love to invite you to share and interact via the chat box, just as much as you feel comfortable to. Really, I'd like you to see this as a safe space as much as possible. And at the end of today's session, we will have some time for questions and reflections. So just some of the kind of key learning outcomes from today are: what is anticipatory grief and how does it impact us, who it might impact within our organisation, how we might support employees navigating anticipatory grief, and also how to care for ourselves and those around us who may be going through anticipatory grief as well. Now, due to the nature of this topic, I always start these sessions with a little bit of a trigger warning. So just to remind you that really important to look after yourselves. If you feel triggered or upset by anything I say, then please feel free to take some time out. I've been doing this for long enough to know that actually sometimes people wake up really interested in coming to these sessions, but actually feel a little bit fragile on the day. So this session will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back. If you suddenly feel like actually this isn't the right time for you, then that's absolutely fine. I won't be offended. But it's great to have so many people signed up for today. I'd also recommend taking sort of 10 to 15 minutes if you can to step away from your desks after today's session, just to kind of honour any feelings that might come up for you. I do try to finish these sessions, sort of talk for about 40 minutes so that we have time for questions, and then hopefully some protected time that you can have back at the end if needed as well. I recognise we might have a bit of a mix of the audience on here today. I've been getting to know Anchor a little bit more and understand there's lots of different faculties to the work that you do. So there might be different perspectives that you can take from today's, if you work in the care and residence side of things, and maybe you'll be looking at this from a more of a practical point of view in terms of how you might see anticipatory grief in those in those residents and clients and service users. Or perhaps you're here because you are living with anticipatory grief yourself, or perhaps have people in your teams who are. So hopefully you can take away lots of really helpful things. And as I said, you'll have a recording of this session, so please do feel free to share it with any of your networks internally if it's been helpful, and any kind of opportunity for feedback we always welcome. So if there's anything at the end that you need from us in terms of additional resources, then do let us know. So just a little bit about who we are. So Compassionate Employers is a programme that launched in 2019. We work under Hospice UK, which is a national hospice organisation. We support over 200 hospices in the UK. Each one is their own independent charities. We connect them all and do lots of national campaigning, national research, best practice, education, as well as loads of fundraising. So we do lots and lots of work with lots of different hospices across the UK. But the Compassionate Employers Programme launched in 2019 with a view to really help organisations be better equipped to support employees who are navigating those significant moments in life. And we specialise around supporting employees who are diagnosed with a terminal illness or have a loved one who is diagnosed with a terminal illness, supporting employees who are navigating their caring responsibility alongside employment, and also supporting employees who are navigating bereavement through their working lives. So essentially, we want to live in a world which is built around greater visibility, greater education, and greater connection. We know that those things are core for helping compassionate culture across organisations. We know how terrible we are in society about talking about death and dying, and we kind of feel like it's our responsibility and employers' responsibilities to make sure that they are playing a part in making sure that that is that kind of greater opportunity for visibility around these key topics, because the ripple effect is huge. And what you learn today might not be applicable right now in your lives, but it may well be in the coming months or years, and it may well be that you can support people outside of work just as much, whether you've got friends and family going through these things as well. So hopefully lots of relevant content for you to take away from today. So we'll start with some key definitions. I always forget that this slide has got some animations on it, but grief is the emotional reaction to a loss, whether that's through a death or through a living loss. Bereavement is the experience of somebody important to us dying. Anticipatory grief, which is what we're focusing on today, refers to feelings of grief or loss that you might feel before the loss actually happens. So we quite often see this in people who maybe have a terminal or a life-limiting condition, or those who are anticipating the death of a loved one. And disenfranchised grief is one that's slightly less spoken about, but is becoming more and more spoken about, thankfully. And that is often the kind of things that was really misunderstood within society. So that could be things like mourning the life that you thought that you might have planned out, loss of identity, loss of job. We see it a lot with the breakdown of relationships or struggle with fertility. Disenfranchised grief is part of our day-to-day, but we don't necessarily always name it as that. And who does it impact? So we'll focus on speaking about anticipatory grief and disenfranchised grief today, because those are the kind of key topics and they go hand in hand. And really, who do we see that impacting? And that is primarily people who are carers, so people who are looking after family members, friends, partners who need their help, whether it's because of an illness, a disability, mental health problem, any person that relies on your support and is dependent on you for some level of care. Someone who has a life-limiting illness, so that is somebody who maybe has a diagnosis that can't be cured, but maybe able to be treated, but might well shorten their lives. And somebody who maybe has a terminal illness. So that's somebody who has an incurable illness, although this could mean that somebody could still be living for days or weeks or years sometimes with terminal illnesses too. We're seeing this more and more with the advancement of medicine. Thankfully, people are living for much longer times, but it means that anticipatory grief is creeping into our lives much sooner, because we are sometimes anticipating the death of somebody or anticipating what the future might look like for a very long time before it actually happens. So we know that a huge percentage of carers are impacted by anticipatory grief. And we did a session a few months ago on during Carers Week in June, and we had some people from Anchor come along. So this might be a repeat of some of the things that you heard during that session, but it's always really important during these sessions to highlight those carer statistics, just to make you really aware of just how many carers exist within your organisations and within society. So every day in the UK, over 600 people leave full-time employment to care for a relative, with an estimated 5.8 million unpaid carers across the UK. Recent research has actually shown that that number is expected to rise by 1 million in the next 10 years. So you can see why this is so important for us to be thinking about this now for businesses, both currently and for their kind of long-term sustainable planning for their employees. And then we have this huge generation of people, this massive generation that's growing, which is our sandwich carers. And that's primarily because we have an aging population and parents having children later in life. So we have this perfect storm where people are navigating both looking after the older people in our generations and the younger people in society as well, whilst also navigating their careers. So we know how much this can impact people, and we know that carers are so much more likely to be navigating anticipatory grief alongside those really difficult caring responsibilities that they've already got. And one of the reasons why we always try to talk about carers a bit during the session is because actually lots of people don't identify themselves as a carer until much later down the line. So any opportunity that we've got to kind of bring it to the forefront and maybe make people think, oh, actually, maybe I am a carer. I just never really thought about it like that. Because research actually shows that it takes on average 2 years for somebody to identify themselves as a carer. And that can often be because most of us will take on these responsibilities and think, well, it's just my job as a daughter, as a sibling, as a spouse, it's just my role to take up. But until that penny drops, quite often we will see employees become overwhelmed, sometimes quite frantic, as they keep trying to keep all of those plates spinning at once, because it's not just the practical side, it's also those emotions. So as employers, as colleagues, it's our jobs to help people maybe identify the fact that their caring role might be having a real impact on their workload and their ability to show up at work. And sometimes that addressing of it and being really open about these conversations in the workplace can cause that light bulb moment for somebody to realise just how influential that caring role is and how it might be impacting different areas of their life. So some of the ways that carers are often impacted include financial implications. Unfortunately, health and social care really struggles at the moment, which means that families are carrying a lot of caring responsibilities on their shoulders. So they're trying to pay for that additional care support, sometimes having to reduce their hours at work to make sure that they can manage it themselves. Because we have a cost of living crisis as well, it's important to highlight that lots of people are struggling under the financial burden, and those sandwich carers, they're also thinking about care for their youngest and care for the older people in their families as well. So they've got that real financial pressure that is quite often kind of goes under the radar for many people. It's also really important to recognise that for people who have caring responsibilities, many of them just run out of hours in the week. So it has a massive impact on their relationships with their friends and their families. Many people struggle with their relationships and their partners, and it can obviously have an effect on their relationship with their employers and their colleagues as well. It's also important to reference the fact that actually it can really impact their ability to have a healthy relationship with the person that they care for. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later when we're talking more in depth about anticipatory grief and disenfranchised grief. But as we see that shift in people from being a mother or a daughter or a son to a carer, we actually see those challenges arise where people can feel like they're in real isolation and they're not actually able to have that relationship that they had previously with the person that they love. We see lots of people really struggle with their personal well-being. So, the exhaustion, the burnout that we see in carers, because it takes so much of our emotional capacity, so much of our physical capacity, and we can really suffer. Many of us sacrifice those things that fill our cup, whether that's our hobbies or our passions. Maybe we won't go for that next job promotion, or we won't go on that holiday because we're worried about that person. And giving up all of those things can have a really negative impact on our own personal well-being. And lastly, just to recap, that identity, it's not something that we always talk about, but a lot of people who have caring responsibilities really struggle to navigate their new identity. It's not necessarily the life that they thought that they would have for themselves, but also the carers that we see who have professional caring roles, they really struggle to switch off from their professional caring roles, whether delivering care at work and also delivering care at home, and actually not ever really having an in-between where they're not just a carer full time. And that can be really, really challenging because they lose all of the things that they kind of love about themselves and the things that they enjoy doing. So lots that carers are navigating. One of the key reasons why we want to talk about these sorts of things during these sessions is just to kind of recognise and highlight all of those different challenges when speaking to somebody who might be a carer in your team. So let's talk a little bit more about anticipatory grief. We know that carers are massively impacted, as are people who are living with an illness themselves. But how does it show up and what does it look like? What are the signs that we could be spotting in the people around us? Many people have incredible anxiety and worry. Somebody who maybe was very carefree before could be suffering with anxiety for the first time in their life. Many people worry, how will they die? What will the next few months look like? Will this be my last birthday, my last Christmas with them? Some people are literally living on that, waking up each day and measuring, is it going to be a good day or a bad day? There's so many people who are living in that constant state of uncertainty, and that can bring so much anxiety and worry to people. Lots of people experience increased irritability. It's really common to see people just go, actually, I just don't have time for silly questions or silly jobs. I don't want to be involved in whatever petty arguments going on. I can't believe that somebody's complaining about something so menial when I have such a significant thing that I'm thinking about and it's just consuming me all of the time. Many people deny reality. They bury their head in the sand. Maybe they won't actually die. Maybe something will come along. Maybe they'll get better. Maybe they'll stay for longer. Many of us feel hopeless, so feeling exhausted and hopeless with the reality that actually we can't change the outcome. We are a society of fixers, so actually it's really, really difficult to come to the acceptance that this is something that we can't necessarily fix. Lots of people in the same vein feel quite hopeless because they feel let down by systems, or they feel really alone in the challenge. Many people navigate the cost of caring and anticipatory grief on their own because we don't necessarily talk about it as a society. And so people feel really let down by the people around them for not showing up. But that might be because they don't necessarily know how to in that moment. It's important to reference the fact that lots of people will start grieving for their loved one before they die. And that might be due to kind of the changes in that person, whether that's their physical appearance or possibly their cognitive as well. So their relationship might change, but we see this quite frequently in dementia and Alzheimer's and in cancer too. It's quite often we look at the person before their illness and we are grieving that person and the relationship that we had. This person who sits in front of us anymore, they're not the same mum that they were. They're not the same loved one that they were to us. And so we are looking at them and really mourning the fact that we can't reach that person anymore. Lots of us will experience anger and frustration. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to the person that I care about? Some people might also just feel really angry at the person who's dying. I don't want them to leave me. Surely there's something they can do. Many people go through this process if a loved one decides to stop treatment. I know that we've heard many stories of siblings, especially, dealing with that very, very differently. Some siblings feeling really angry about the idea of someone giving up if they've decided to end terminal kind of life extending treatment. Some people may question their faith and belief, and on the flip side, some people may actually really lean into those faith systems as well. So lots of people kind of end up saying, well, why would somebody want to make me feel like this or make my loved one suffer like this? And on the flip side of that, faith communities can be incredible senses of support for people. So it can be that actually I'm so thankful for my religion, for my faith, and that community that has rallied around me to help me navigate these few months or these years. It's also just really important to highlight that lots of people feel real immense guilt. So sometimes when you're living with anticipatory grief, you might have the feeling that actually the person dying would be a relief. It would be that they don't have to live like this any longer. You don't want to see them in this pain or distress. You don't want to keep losing different parts of them. And also, you might just feel like you don't want to live with this uncertainty in your life anymore, with your life on hold and having to worry about it all of the time. And we see a lot of guilt in people who live with anticipatory grief for those reasons, because sometimes it feels like you're willing this person not to be here anymore. But it's actually, it's not like that. It's really okay to have each of these thoughts and feelings. And one of the big parts, one of the biggest takeaways from today is to understand that making space and time to honour and respect each of these emotions are really important, and they are part of the process of coping with anticipatory grief and being able to make the most of the time that you've got left with your loved ones. I think this is quite helpful just to phrase that last bit there. It was heartbreaking to see Mum change from the person that she was before to the person that she ended up being. This vibrant and strong person turned into someone so vulnerable. I kept thinking, please let her be free of this. Not because I wanted her to go, but because I did not want her to experience it. And that is really sadly, very commonly the thing that we hear when somebody is supporting somebody either in frailty and old age, and then watching people just become more and more poorly, worried about what the next infection might be, worried about them having a fall. Or, of course, if we've got somebody who's living with a diagnosis, which is making them slip away slowly, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, we are seeing this so commonly in people living with this anticipatory grief. So we've spoken a bit about anticipatory grief. I'm just going to speak a little bit more about disenfranchised grief because we often see them in parallel together. So disenfranchised grief is a grief that we will all experience throughout our lives. And actually it starts from quite a young age. So this can be a loss that impacts us emotionally and physically. And some examples, as I said earlier on, might be things like relationship breakdowns, a loss of friendships, loss of jobs, moving homes, mourning the life that you thought you might have. We see it in infertility. You know, I thought I'd be a parent by now. I thought that I would have this life. I thought I would have met the love of my life by now, and actually just not having things work out exactly as you'd maybe imagine them to be. But carers and people living with anticipatory grief often experience kind of varying levels of disenfranchised grief because actually it impacts every area of our life. So it might be that we have guilt at work, for example, we're not able to function or perform the same way that we were before. Am I letting my team down? Am I letting my managers down? And in our carers role, we may feel guilty because we have that resentment towards the person that we care for. Lots of us struggle with that loss of identity. You know, who am I now that I'm a carer? I'm not the same friend or the colleague. I'm not the same partner anymore. And really importantly, after someone dies, who am I now? I've been a carer for all this time. What do I do with myself? I don't know what my identity is anymore. And it can take a long time for us to figure that out, figure out who we are, especially whilst we're navigating returning to work alongside that grief and bereavement as well. Lots of people feel anger, you know, anger for the life that we thought that we would have. I was meant to travel and now I have to stay home and I can't go on holiday because I never know when things are going to get worse. I can't plan for the future. I can't take on a new job promotion. People feel really frustrated by the lack of control they have in the situation. And lots of people just find that they have a massive sense of loss of drive and motivation. You know, what is the point? This feels never ending. I don't know how long I can keep doing this for. And I think it's important to highlight, just in case you are working in a care setting, that disenfranchised grief in a care setting is incredibly common among residents. We see it in people who are grieving the fact that they are living in an assisted living space rather than in their home comforts. Their relationships with their families may be breaking down. They may be grieving the fact that, you know, they used to live at home with their wife and now they live independently in a facilitated care space. Lots of people obviously suffer with the fact that they're losing their ability to do things over time as well. And that lack of sense of control can bring out that anger and that real loss of identity in people as well. So really helpful to just be mindful of how this might be applicable in your workplace as well. So how can we support each other through this? There's lots of different ways, but one of the key ways is to be compassionate. It's really important to listen to your employees, to get to know them, to trust them, and to make real efforts to understand their personal challenges. It's important if you know somebody is a carer in your team to be able to identify that and also ask frequently how they're doing. If somebody's let you know that they've got somebody in their life who is living with a life-limiting condition, then be mindful and check in and make sure that you are doing those check-ins to make sure that you know at what stage they are at and what accommodations you might be able to make as a manager to make sure that they have that time. Offer flexible working, not always the easiest thing to do, but can you offer compressed hours? Can you do reduced hours if they're working from home ability or working remotely? Can we change the role that somebody has within the organisation for a short period of time if they're navigating something alongside? Trying to check in if they need any support with workload, depending on the nature of the role. This might be that we can kind of take a break from customer facing roles, or maybe if we're in a care setting, we say actually it's not appropriate for this person to be working with end of life residents at the moment, just to protect their well-being, really thinking proactively about the support that we can show to people. And crucially, I can't express this enough, but lots of policies are very much dependent on when somebody dies, and there are carers protections now. And I know Anchor has some brilliant policies in place I'm sure we can share as part of the recording after this, where you'll be able to take leave in the run up to somebody's death. But give people the time off if you can, if you've got the ability to give people the time off during those final weeks and months of somebody's life, because time is such a precious thing when you are living with somebody who has a life-limiting condition. And it's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our employees, is to give them that time to spend with their loved ones, whether that's in the hospital, in a hospice, in a care home, wherever that is, to make those memories or just to be present in those moments with them is really, really important. And it will change the way that they bond with you as a team and the organisation, because they will feel indebted to you for giving them that time and that space and honouring their experiences. We're going to talk a little bit about communication quickly, because it's really, really, really important. And on the screen, there are some phrases that we've heard over the years whilst facilitating these sessions and others. And they are all real life examples of things that people have just said without thinking. I'm sure they'll be okay. This is a classic that goes hand in hand with, oh, well, have they tried this treatment yet? We're a nation of fixers, as I said earlier on, and actually it's really common to make the mistake that we just have to fill the silence with something. So we say something like, they'll be okay, when we don't know what else to say. But alternatively, we could be saying things like, I'm really sorry to hear about your mum's diagnosis. It's really unfair, and I'm going to do my best to support you however I can. Is there anything I can do for you right now? You'll be okay, just be strong. Again, I think maybe that's just been embedded in us for generations. And often it's something just to say something to be helpful rather than not saying anything at all. But this can completely shut down the opportunity for that person to be vulnerable and to share with us. So actually changing that to be, thanks so much for sharing this information with me. I'd like to do whatever I can to support you as you navigate this. How would you like me to check in with you and review how we can support you during this time? A very common one again is sharing personal experience, and not always positive personal experience. My mum had cancer too, and her death was awful. Unfortunately, people try to fill the silence with something, but if you haven't got something that's positive to share, it can be very, very hurtful to hear the worst case scenario being played out for you. Well, at least they were at your wedding. I think the simple rule is just, if you have to say the words at least in a sentence, then don't say it at all. At least they were a good age. At least you had them at their wedding. At least they met their grandchild. All of those are really hurtful ways of diminishing the impact of that lived experience in their relationship with this person. Keep working and keep busy, and you'll avoid thinking about it too much. I think this one is particularly common in healthcare, actually, and quite often many of us find work a really helpful distraction, but actually we have this kind of toxic trait of pushing the idea that it's better to just keep pushing through things instead of actually addressing and being vulnerable, and rather than facing it head on, just kind of burying our heads in the sand. But we hear stories all of the time about people who really regret how much they kept going and kept busy, because it meant that they were distracting themselves from the reality and they weren't spending that quality time with their loved ones whilst they had it. So actually, if you see somebody who seems to be overworking perhaps, and that they're navigating this kind of time, perhaps suggest you know, how can I support you managing your workload during this time? How can we introduce some reasonable adjustments so that you can spend as much time with your family as you may need to or want to in the coming weeks and months? So we've kind of spoken a little bit about language and why it's important. And some of you may have seen this slide before if you've come along to our previous sessions, but these are our 6 key principles for compassionate conversations. And I think it's always important to highlight them because we don't naturally find the time to actively listen, and it can be really challenging. So the first one is listening attentively. So pay undivided attention, be present in the conversation, not just listening to respond. We are all very busy people. If we're having these conversations in a workplace, try and minimize distractions so you can be fully present with that person. Turn on your do not disturb, find a private room. If you can't find a private setting, then maybe suggest going for a walk so that you can keep that privacy between you and being able to kind of be really present in that moment instead of having people come and ask things of you during that conversation. Respond mindfully, so take a moment to process before you respond. We're quite quick quite often to respond to things because we try to fill that silence, but actually consider what you've heard so that you can really build on that conversation, and it will be really helpful whilst you're trying to mirror their language or reference personally the things that they've shared with you. If they're talking about their dad and they've mentioned his name, maybe use his name and explain that you're sorry to hear about the things that they're going through. Being observant, you know, just noticing those little details, the body language, the mood, the attitude. Are they there trying to tell you something in a quick manner because actually they're not feeling like they want to talk about it and they just need to communicate with you what's going on? Or are they there looking for that support and that space to listen and to sit with them in that sadness? It's really important to try not to seem too restless. It can make people feel like you have somewhere else to be, or maybe that the conversation is making you uncomfortable. So be mindful of their body language, but also be mindful of your own. Manage the silence. As I said, you know, we're all quite quick to fill the silence. It's something that I'm trying to work on personally. I think we all are in lots of ways. Active listening can be really hard, especially when it makes us feel quite uncomfortable. But sometimes just sitting in the sadness and sitting in that silence with somebody is actually all that somebody needs. And on the resource hub, which you'll have a link to at the end of this, you'll be able to access some e-learning that can help you practice each of these qualities as well. Respecting emotions, you know, we've had a discussion around all of the different ways that these feelings might show up for people, and we know it's not a one size fits all territory. So respect whatever comes up for each person. Respect the fact that each time that these things might happen, they might be different. You might have somebody who works in your organization for many years and they may experience multiple losses or multiple caring responsibilities for different people throughout that time, and they might look different each time, and what they need from you might be different each time. Alex, the dual model of grief is a really helpful one, and actually we reference that in one of our other sessions, so we'll make sure to share that too. And just remember, you know, that we need to consider all different perspectives, you know, treat everybody as an individual, recognize what emotions might be coming up for them, what reasonable adjustments might be appropriate for them. One of the best ways you can do this is to get to know the people in your team, you know, spend the time to understand the stresses that are in their life, what kind of support system do they have, and actually what kind of support are they looking to you for. Try not to just assume that everyone is one size fits all, because each person will need something different from you. So it's really important to know. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to identify the carers in your team. I won't dwell too much on this, but there's a few really helpful resources. You've got carers passports, and I'm not sure if you actually implement them at the moment at Anchor, but I do think that you've got a process at the moment for identifying carers. So definitely lean into using those processes. We've also just recently launched our Get to Know Me document, which is all about line managers and teams having the ability to get to know each other a little bit better, to actually build the relationship, the safety and the trust and the space for vulnerability within those teams. But some of the questions that you might want to ask if you think somebody might be a carer in your team, so what are your caring responsibilities, how they might impact your ability to work? Do you know how that caring responsibility might change in the future? Now, that question is really important when we're talking about anticipatory grief, because if somebody is looking after somebody who has an illness that is going to decline, then it's really important to understand that actually what stage are we at now, and where can we support you in the future, and what does that look like? What kind of support network do you have outside of work, if any? That will help you address actually if this person needs a little bit more from us, whether we're their line manager, whether we've got the employee assistance program that we can signpost them, or of course to the resources that we have within our members hub for compassionate employers as well. How can we support with those flexible arrangements and workload reprioritization or any kind of shift in their workload? How do you show the signs that you're struggling? Actually asking people, like, do you know what the signs are when you're struggling? How can I look out for them? I want to be attentive as your manager, but it's really helpful for me to understand how to spot those signs. Like, do you overwork? Do you withdraw? Are you going to shut down in those moments, or do you become more frantic? It's really helpful if you can understand what they the ways that they show that they're struggling, and how they might want you to support them in that moment, so that you can create some really nice tailored support for that person and really show up as effectively as possible for them. So if you're living with anticipatory grief, or somebody that is in your network then these are some of the ways that we can help kind of navigate it. Building a support network, really important. Surround yourself with trusted friends and families or colleagues who you can turn to support you on those more difficult days, people who you can communicate with. You don't have to necessarily be the person who's communicating all of the time. If you're not sure about how to communicate to your manager and you've got a really close friend within your team, then feel free to share with them and ask them to support you having that conversation with your line managers or leaders. Don't feel like you have to do it all on your own. Set realistic goals. More often than not, caring responsibilities fall on one person's shoulders. Perhaps you're the sibling that doesn't have children, or maybe your children are grown up, or maybe you're the one that has a less serious job, or perhaps you're the one who actually works professionally in a care setting, and so people just think that you're the best person to be also taking on all of the personal caring responsibilities as well. But the phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," I think is actually very applicable to it takes a village to see somebody through to the end of their lives. Try and identify that village, whether it's healthcare providers, community groups, whether it's employers, whether it's family, whether it's friends. Try not to do it all on your own. Try to lean on those networks. I know sometimes that's easier said than done, but wherever you can, try to build that village. Be informed, so know what is out there and know when it's right to seek professional support. Focus on quality of life and memory making. It can be really hard when you're living in a state of having to wake up each day and see whether it's a good day or a bad day. So try not to dwell too much on the bad days, but make the most of those good days and find the gratitude in each of those days. Try to set boundaries wherever you can, whether that's professional boundaries or personal boundaries, but trying to protect your time and energy by setting those boundaries with the people in your network, so that you can be fully present and look after yourself during that time, whilst also being there for your loved ones. Prioritize self-care, so identify those activities that actually help you relax and switch off. Whatever it is that fills your cup. Is it a daily walk? Is it going to the gym? Is it listening to your favorite podcast, or just having a home cooked meal? Those small actions can make such a huge difference in terms of that, being able to look after ourselves and recharge our batteries. And make space for the feelings. Do your best to honour any emotion that comes up. Sit with the sadness. Try to accept that it's okay not to be okay, and make space just to feel anything that comes up for you. So just a few kind of tips on planning for the future. One of the biggest challenges of anticipatory grief is we often feel like we're totally out of control. And so actually planning for the future can be really helpful to help us kind of really feel a little bit more prepared for what's to come. So a few tips are understanding the illness. speaking to the experts and understanding how the person's health might look at the moment and what that might look like in the next few weeks or the next few months, if it's easy enough to predict. If somebody is in their final days or weeks or months of life, that might mean having those conversations with those healthcare providers just to have a greater understanding of what that final moment might look like, what those final moments might look like for your loved one. Try and find the support. There's lots of groups, there's loads of services and charities that are actually set up to support people navigating anticipatory grief. So finding the ones that can really help you prepare and feel a little bit more prepared to make the most of the time that you've got left with your loved ones is really important. We will signpost some of these in a moment. Try to have conversations about final wishes. This one's really hard. And actually, I recommend having these conversations as early on in the journey as possible, because it's not the kind of conversation that you want to be having in the final weeks. You want to be having it as soon as possible, really. Ideally, before somebody's even poorly. Let's just all be more proactive in thinking about planning for the end. But it can be really comforting when somebody is coming to the end to know that you know what their final wishes are for when they do get worse. So that might be knowing things like where they want to die and being able to honour that. Are they in a home? Are they in a hospice? Would they like to be at their home? Are they in a care home? What would they like to happen when they die? Is there anywhere? What are their funeral wishes? What are the things that they'd like people to remember about them? What are the stories that they want to tell? All of those sorts of things can be really, really helpful to have that memory making and making sure that you've got those final wishes documented. There's some brilliant resources that you can simply fill out with your loved ones to have those conversations and make them a little bit easier and guided. We've got some resources on our Dying Matters website, and we've also got some signposting on the resource hub as well, which I'll make sure we link to. Document moments. This one's quite important, but you're never going to have too many photos or videos or letters or voice notes. Making memories and documenting time. It can be really, really, really important. If you don't live near or with the person who's ill, then it can be really nice to record phone calls or voice notes so that you've got something if you haven't got the ability to be there in person to take photos and videos. But each of those kind of that memory making is really, really important and will be really helpful in those moments of grief, especially in those early days. Try to have a look at managing administration. So that might be setting you up as power of attorney or making practical financial decisions about the care or the future. Can also be really helpful to transfer names on accounts and things like that. It can be difficult to have these conversations because it can make people feel like we're rushing them out the door, but actually it really helps that kind of practical side of grieving when the death administration has to be done after somebody dies. It can be a mountain of work if you don't have some of these things kind of written down in advance. But also finding out what support is available for you after that person dies. So whether that's from your employer or whether that's finding out what kind of bereavement support is in your area. There's loads and loads of resources on the hub, and we'll make sure that everything is signposted along with the recording. This is just a slight view of the hub, and this is the carers section. Within the hub itself, we have a terminal illness section where you can get some guidance and advice if you yourself have been diagnosed with a terminal illness or somebody that you care for. You've got all of the advice and guidance around caring for somebody, but you've also got a whole hub which is all about supporting people following a bereavement. The portal's split into 3 key sections. So one is for HR, one is for line managers, and one is for employees generally. So you can kind of look at it from lots of different perspectives if you have a specific role within the organisation, and you might be able to find some really helpful resources within there. And finally, just to signpost you onto some other resource support. So if you are living with anticipatory grief, or you just want to understand a little bit more about what to expect in end of life, our website has a huge amount of resource on it in terms of navigating a terminal illness, but also what to expect in those final days. Carers UK has a huge amount of resource and support, as well as a helpline for carers who are navigating the reality of caring and working. Age UK has some brilliant financial advice and support around support for carers and also support for terminally ill. Yeah, anybody who's living with a terminal illness, as well as some really great stuff around respite. The Alzheimer's Society has a wonderful community hub. So if you have a loved one who is living with dementia or Alzheimer's, or if you yourself are living with dementia or Alzheimer's, then there is a huge amount of resource on their website, but also they have this incredible forum where you can connect with other people, share experiences, and get some real advice and signposting from people who have been living through it. And finally, is Marie Curie, who have a wonderful helpline as well. Traditionally, Marie Curie was a cancer organisation, but they actually deal with all sorts of different illnesses now. So it's they have a huge amount of resource on their website as well for lots and lots of different scenarios. So there's a huge amount out there. Hopefully, with all of these and with the resource hub, you'll have quite a lot of support and further resources that you can go on and have a look at. But I will. I'm going to stop sharing now if I can, and then answer any questions if you have any, or any reflections that's been helpful, or anything that you'd like further kind of guidance on. Yeah, thank you, Doreen, for sharing. I know that Be Strong is a real classic for all of us, I think. So many of us have said these things. And yeah, Alex, the dual process model of grief is really, really helpful. And yeah, great. I mean, a really helpful reflection is knowing that, or being more aware that actually care assistants and yeah, the leaders are dealing with it every day. Anticipatory grief is one of the most prominent things that you'll find in a care setting, whilst people are navigating those emotions, and also just understanding how it might show up for somebody is really helpful. Because if you have a particularly challenging resident who is just kicking off constantly, the idea that actually if you are able to have a wider view on the fact that this person is navigating so many different changes and they are navigating this loss, and actually the way they're behaving or the way that they're lashing out at us might not be about us at all, it's actually just about the situation, and being able to have a bit more perspective on that can be really helpful. um, I'm really glad it's been helpful. Thank you very much, everyone. Alex, I don't think that you're alone in that, being told that it's too morbid to change the subject. As you can imagine, I'm a wonderful dinner party guest who always brings up the importance of talking about death and dying, and being prepared for the worst case scenario. So I'm really glad it's been helpful, and I will absolutely share the slides and the recording as well. And I'll make sure that there is a link to all of the relevant policies. So whether that's carers leave or bereavement leave that Anchor's got in place, so that you guys have all got access to all of those as well in one place. But really appreciate you coming along. Sam, sending you lots of love. And yeah, if you want any specific support, feel free to email me directly. I'll put my email address in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a lovely day. Have a little step away from yeah, step away from your screen and have a little bit of a time back. Thanks so much.